Despite a diagnosis that would shake any man to his core, King Charles III did not waver. The public watched in quiet awe as he stood before the Commonwealth, his voice steady, his eyes clear, confirming what many had feared but few were prepared to face: cancer, not just a private affliction, but a national concern. Yet, the king offered no dramatic plea for sympathy. Instead, he gave something rarer: calm, composed duty. He made it clear that his illness would not interfere with the responsibilities he had sworn to uphold. And in that moment, the king did. What his ancestors had done, he chose service over self. Behind the palace walls, a very different picture was forming. The once busy calendar of engagements was subtly trimmed. Ceremonial appearances became more calculated. Whispers filtered out of Buckingham Palace, carefully curated by aides who knew the public would read between every line. Updates on the king's condition came sparingly, each word weighed with the precision of a nation watching. The monarchy had entered a new phase, one in which absence became as symbolic as presence. And yet, the show went on. Public events were never cancelled. Outright, only reassigned, the machinery of the crown continued to turn, but it was clear someone was helping carry the weight. It wasn't just the palace staff adjusting to the new reality. The royal family itself, notoriously private in times of distress, closed ranks with unspoken solidarity. Prince William began to appear more frequently at high-profile events, subtly absorbing his father's role with grace. Queen Camila took on quieter engagements, offering stability while never seeking the spotlight. And in the middle of this, tightly controlled evolution stood King Charles, determined not to be defined by weakness, determined to control the narrative. He had lived his entire life in waiting. Now, in his reign, he would not allow illness to steal what had finally become his. Still, there was no ignoring the growing unease among royal observers. How serious was his condition? Was he truly fit to rule? The palace offered no details beyond brief medical acknowledgements, but that silence did not calm the storm, it fed it. Some speculated that a soft regency could be forming, a gradual handover of power masked in ceremonial continuity. Others noted the increasing presence of Princess Catherine and Prince William, not just as heirs in waiting, but as figures of immediate influence. It was a strategy the monarchy had used before quiet transitions, never publicly declared, but plainly visible for those who looked closely. And when the king did appear, there was something changed in his demeanor. The pageantry had softened. Gone were the grand entrances and heavily adorned robes. In their place stood a man more introspective, more conscious of time. He chose his words carefully. His appearances carried the weight of legacy, not ambition. It was as though he knew the monarchy's survival would not depend on tradition alone, but on trust, transparency, and transformation. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. Even his most ardent supporters recognized the subtle message. The king was preparing the institution for life beyond him. In many ways, it was reminiscent of the final years of Queen Elizabeth II. Her steady hand had guided the nation through decades of change, her strength measured in calm perseverance. Now, King Charles seemed to be following the same blueprint, maintaining public service, even as personal health battles brewed beneath the surface. But there was one key difference. While Elizabeth had spent a lifetime reigning in silence, Charles had always been vocal, forward-thinking, and ready for reform. And now, facing the greatest trial of his reign, that reformist fire hadn't dimmed, it had sharpened. He would not exit quietly. He would set the stage for what was to come. As the king faced his health battle with dignity, a subtle shift began, to unfold one that would place a new royal in the nation's spotlight. While King Charles stepped back, Princess Catherine stepped forward, and the world began to notice. What began as a few additional engagements quietly passed onto her schedule soon evolved into something far more symbolic. Catherine wasn't just filling in, she was leading. One by one, she began representing the royal family at high-profile state functions once reserved for the monarch himself. From international conferences to solemn remembrance services, her presence was no longer supplementary, it was strategic. The press picked up on it immediately, calling her the anchor of the monarchy and the face of the royal future. Headlines across the globe didn't just admire her elegance, they forecasted her reign. Approval ratings surged in her favor. While trust in the monarchy had fluctuated for years, public sentiment toward Catherine grew steadier with every appearance. She was relatable without losing her sense of regal stature. Every gesture, every speech was precise and intentional, rooted in compassion yet reinforced with strength. Royal watchers noted how the people responded to her differently. It wasn't just respect, it was loyalty. She was no longer in Princess Diana's shadow. She had become her own kind of icon. The narrative shifted, and suddenly, Catherine wasn't just part of the royal family, she was becoming its center of gravity. Beyond Britain's borders, admiration for Catherine only deepened. Diplomats praised her poise at global summits. Charities across Europe and the Commonwealth applauded her consistency and integrity. Behind closed doors, even those who had once doubted her commitment to the crown began to concede. She had evolved into something formidable. What was once considered a quiet, supportive role beside Prince William had turned into a commanding presence that rivaled those at the top. International leaders, foreign press, and royal commentators all agreed Catherine's global influence had reached unprecedented heights for a Princess of Wales. But the shift wasn't accidental. Sources close to the palace hinted that this was part of a longer-term strategy. Leaks from trusted insiders suggested that King Charles himself had expressed deep pride in her evolution. He reportedly confided to aides that Catherine had exceeded every expectation. Some whispered that her involvement in constitutional matters was being quietly expanded, that she was participating in strategic meetings and confidential briefings previously reserved for senior monarchs. Others claimed she had earned the king's ear on delicate decisions, especially those relating to the monarchy's future relevance. Experts began to speculate openly. Could the Princess of Wales be preparing for more than just ceremonial duties? Was she being groomed not just as queen consort, but as a powerful figure in shaping how the institution operates behind the scenes? The question wasn't whether she would wear the crown, but how much influence she would wield before that day arrived. With each passing month, the evidence grew harder to ignore. Catherine had become the monarchy's moral compass, public face, and internal stabilizer all at once. But the attention wasn't just ceremonial. What happened next shook the foundations of royal protocol. Prince William steps up, balancing tradition and modernity in anticipation of future responsibilities. And this time, it wasn't symbolic. It was deliberate, visible, and deeply strategic. Behind the scenes, he began co-chairing key state briefings alongside King Charles's most trusted advisors, an unspoken signal that the throne was already preparing its next chapter. These weren't ceremonial roles passed down for the cameras. These were real decisions, national conversations, and internal power moves that demonstrated William's growing command of the institution he was born to inherit. The gradual inclusion wasn't just training, it was succession in motion, without a formal declaration. Suddenly, his schedule swelled with state visits, royal tours, and high-level military inspections. His presence became more than diplomatic. It was defining. When he spoke on global stages, the tone had changed. No longer the eager young prince searching for his voice, William now delivered speeches with conviction, with vision. Audiences noticed, commentators noticed. Even critics began to fall silent as he navigated delicate political landscapes with a steady hand and sharpened instinct. Where once he was described as cautious, he was now called capable. Where once he followed, he now led. Insiders whispered that this wasn't simply the product of preparation, it was the result of personal mentoring. King Charles, in the privacy of royal corridors, was guiding his son through the maze of royal diplomacy and constitutional responsibility. Father and son had never appeared closer in purpose. The training was quiet but intense. Their bond, once strained by generational differences, had become one of mutual respect, rooted in duty. Charles understood that the monarchy's survival depended on relevance, and William represented the evolution that relevance required. And as William gained strength, conversations within the palace subtly shifted focus. Eyes turned toward the next generation. Prince George, though still a child, was being slowly introduced to the reality of his destiny. Not with pressure, but with precision. Carefully timed public appearances. Educational visits crafted with meaning. The groundwork was being laid not just for a king-in-waiting, but for a dynasty sustained through stability and foresight. It was a legacy being carved not in stone, but in strategy. The vision was becoming clear. The monarchy wasn't waiting for a crisis to spark change. It was building its future brick by brick, moment by moment, with William at the center of it all. Advisors, staff, and even Parliament insiders began referring to him not just as the heir, but as a shadow monarch, a stabilizing force already being tested for what lay ahead. And the public responded. Approval ratings for William surged, particularly among younger Britons who had once been apathetic toward the royal institution. In William, they saw responsibility without arrogance, compassion without weakness, and the ability to speak to the present without forgetting the past. But even William's rise couldn't overshadow the woman by his side, because Catherine's transformation was just beginning. From Duchess to Princess of Wales, Catherine's journey reflects her growing influence and dedication. Once viewed as a graceful consort in the shadow of her husband, she has since shattered every limitation placed upon her by tradition, protocol, and public doubt. With every step, Catherine has transformed not only herself, but the monarchy she represents. No longer content with ceremonial duties alone, she has taken center stage as the royal family's most powerful and consistent public figure. At a time when Britain faced uncertainty, scandal, and generational change, it was Catherine who offered something rare: steadiness with purpose. Her Shaping Us campaign didn't just earn headlines, it redefined what modern royalty could mean. With a powerful focus on childhood development and mental health, the initiative captured the attention of educators, scientists, and political figures alike. But it wasn't just policy, it was personal. Catherine shared stories. She connected. And through that connection, she won over a skeptical public who once believed royal work was simply for show. Schools adopted the program's frameworks. Parents praised its practicality. The campaign became a national conversation, and at the heart of it stood Catherine, measured, passionate, and utterly unshaken by scrutiny. Then came a moment that changed everything. In a rare move reserved for those the monarch deems irreplaceable, King Charles named her a royal companion of the Order of the Companions of Honor. The honor was more than symbolic. It was historic, reserved for individuals whose service reshapes the nation. It had never before been granted to a royal of her generation. This wasn't a gesture, it was a public coronation of trust. Behind closed doors, aides confirmed what insiders already knew. Catherine was no longer just part of the royal machine. She was steering it. World leaders took notice. Diplomats, who once hesitated to involve royals in high-stakes affairs, now requested her presence. She brought calm to chaos, unity to conflict, and most importantly, she listened. Whether at international forums or private humanitarian summits, Catherine's voice carried weight. She wasn't a passive attendee, she was a strategic operator. Foreign governments and British institutions alike began requesting her direct involvement in initiatives once led exclusively by the king or his heirs. This wasn't just influence, this was power being exercised with poise and without provocation. And yet, amidst all this, she remained unassuming. When King Charles stood before guests at Windsor Castle and publicly thanked her not just as daughter-in-law, but as the soul of this family's next chapter, even the most hardened press corps stood silent. It was not a planned moment. It was a declaration. The king understood what the country had already accepted. Catherine had become the monarchy's anchor, its most visible reassurance that the institution could survive change and grow stronger because of it. But the biggest shift wasn't ceremonial, it was constitutional, and it would change royal history forever. Whispers from inside Buckingham Palace suggest a move that defies centuries of royal tradition. It began with a single line buried in a tabloid column, a vague reference to succession talks that allegedly took place behind closed doors. The source? Anonymous? The timing? Suspicious. But the effect was immediate. Media outlets pounced, headlines exploded, and the British public, already weary from uncertainty, was thrown into a frenzy. Could it be possible? Could King Charles be considering something so radical, so unprecedented, that it would alter the very foundation of the monarchy? The rumor didn't stop with one article. It spread like wildfire. Social media amplified it, and royal commentators began speculating out loud. Was Princess Catherine being groomed not just as queen consort, but as a successor? A leader in her own right? The idea was outrageous, yet compelling. She had become the most visible, most admired, and most trusted face of the royal family. With the king battling illness and William's public role carefully managed, many began to wonder if Catherine was quietly being positioned for something more than the crown that comes through marriage. But beneath the speculation, the facts remained immutable. Royal succession law is clear. The throne passes by bloodline, not favor. Prince William, as the direct heir, cannot be bypassed without triggering a constitutional crisis. Catherine, beloved as she is, cannot inherit the crown in her own right. The idea of a reigning Queen Catherine without William would be legally impossible. And yet, the mere fact that this rumor gained such momentum said something more powerful than law ever could. It revealed just how much people saw her as capable of leading. Legal scholars stepped in quickly to clarify the confusion. Constitutional experts outlined the rules of primogeniture and the historical precedents. No, a reigning queen through appointment was not an option under current British law. No, the monarch cannot arbitrarily name a spouse as heir. And no, the palace had issued no such decree. But by then, the narrative had already shifted. The truth mattered less than the perception. And the perception was this: Catherine wasn't just sharing the royal spotlight, she was defining it. Amid the swirling rumors, the palace responded, but not with a denial. Instead, they issued carefully worded statements praising Catherine's commitment to service and her integral role in the royal family's future. It wasn't confirmation, it wasn't correction, it was intentional ambiguity. Enough to calm the constitutional purists, but vague enough to keep the public enthralled. Strategically, it was a masterstroke. They didn't need to fuel the fire. They only had to let it burn slowly. Even so, the king's actions hinted at something equally powerful. Catherine wasn't just being elevated in title, but in trust. As Catherine ascended, Camila stepped back without a word, without a press release. No headlines marked the shift. No formal statements declared a change. But for those paying attention, the transformation was impossible to ignore. Engagements once led by Queen Camila quietly disappeared from the official royal calendar. Her presence at major events became increasingly rare. And when she did appear, she was often positioned to the side less central, more reserved. It wasn't retreat in disgrace, it was retreat with intention. A soft fade, as if choreographed behind velvet curtains, with every move deliberate and symbolic. The media followed suit. Coverage that once divided equal space between the Queen and the Princess of Wales now leaned decisively in Catherine's direction. Photographers no longer waited for Camila to arrive. Commentators no longer analyzed her wardrobe or her statements. Public interest had shifted, and it had done so with shocking speed. Catherine wasn't just the star. She had become the narrative. And Camila, whether by choice or design, wasn't competing. Instead, she was yielding. And that decision, quiet, as it seemed, maybe the most strategic one Camila had ever made. Reports began circulating from palace insiders, soft murmurs that Camila, far from being sidelined, was orchestrating her own withdrawal, not out of resentment or rejection, but from wisdom. She had fought for years to be accepted. Now, having finally reached the throne beside her husband, she understood something deeper. True legacy isn't measured in appearances, but in influence. And sometimes, that means knowing when to step away. Camila, it seems, was comfortable letting the younger generation lead. And no one embodied that next chapter more than Catherine. Behind the scenes, the dynamic between the two women remained solid. Camila, insiders revealed, had become one of Catherine's most trusted advisors. She offered guidance quietly, away from cameras, away from headlines. Their relationship wasn't competitive, it was complementary. Where Catherine brought freshness, Camila brought experience. Where one captivated crowds, the other anchored from behind. It was an unlikely alliance built on survival, sacrifice, and the understanding that history would not be kind to division. Together, they shaped a transition the monarchy desperately needed, but Camila knew her time in the spotlight had served its purpose. Even their public appearances together began to change. The king and Camilla, once inseparable at formal events, began appearing less frequently as a pair. Sometimes Charles would appear alone. Other times, it was William and Catherine who stood beside him, taking the symbolic place of heirs and future monarchs. This wasn't oversight, it was orchestration. The shift in royal visibility was intentional, a subtle signal that the crown was already resting on the next generation's shoulders. And Camilla's absence, though unexplained, spoke louder than any official address could. Royal insiders finally put words to what many had already sensed. This was a strategic generational transition. Not forced, not abrupt, but designed to ease the monarchy into its future without fracture. Camilla's quiet retreat wasn't a step down, it was a step aside. A gesture of support for the woman who now carried the nation's hopes. With Camilla stepping aside and Catherine rising, the monarchy's future looked younger and more modern than ever before. With changing times and challenges, the British monarchy stands at a crossroads, contemplating its path forward. The institution, once seen as unshakable in its traditions, now finds itself forced to evolve or risk irrelevance. Public sentiment is no longer rooted in blind loyalty. It's conditional, measured, and demanding. Polls across the United Kingdom reveal a shift in expectations. A growing majority no longer supports the sprawling structure of extended royals. The future, they say, should be leaner, more transparent, and focused only on those who serve the people directly. The age of privilege without purpose is ending, and the monarchy knows it. Behind palace gates, conversations once whispered in private are now finding their way into national headlines. Should every ceremonial function, every parade, procession, and pageant still exist in a modern, working democracy? Some argue yes, that tradition holds the soul of the nation together. But others question the necessity of archaic customs that feel out of step with a struggling economy and a rapidly changing global order. The answers are not simple, and the stakes are higher than ever. The monarchy cannot remain frozen in time. It must reflect the world it claims to represent or face the consequences of detachment. In this fragile moment, one couple has emerged as the institution's clearest hope. William and Catherine are no longer just heirs, they are the monarchy's brand, its compass, and its most relatable link to a disillusioned public. Their ability to engage authentically, to show vulnerability, and to address real-world issues, mental health, climate change, inequality, has made them powerful symbols of a crown trying to remain relevant. They've learned to navigate a world of constant scrutiny, misinformation, and online criticism, and somehow they've come through it stronger. In a digital age where one wrong move can shatter an entire reputation, they've learned to move with precision. But the challenge ahead is generational. The monarchy no longer holds the same meaning for the youth of Britain. Gen Z and millennials, two of the largest voting blocs, view the institution through a critical lens. Many see it as outdated, privileged, and disconnected from the realities of daily life. To them, pageantry isn't enough. Authenticity matters. Accountability matters. And whether the monarchy survives another century may depend entirely on how well it adapts to that truth. Tradition cannot be abandoned, but it can no longer be worshipped for its own sake. Globally, the monarchy's image has changed as well. The post-Brexit era has reframed how Britain is seen on the world stage, and with that, how its royal family is perceived. Commonwealth countries are re-evaluating their allegiances. Former colonies are demanding apologies, reparations, and acknowledgement. The once unquestioned respect for the Windsors has become conditional, shaped by politics, history, and culture. The crown no longer reigns on legacy alone. It must now earn its place, act as a symbol of unity, and serve a moral function that aligns with a new global conscience. At the heart of this debate lies one of the most complicated questions of all. Should the monarchy maintain its current constitutional power? Or will the coming decades force reform? Legal scholars and lawmakers have begun speculating whether the next monarch will need to work more closely with Parliament or even consider constitutional limits on royal influence. These aren't radical theories anymore, they're part of a growing public discourse. The question is not whether change will come, but how swiftly it will arrive. As questions swirl and eyes remain fixed on the future, one figure represents the balance of duty and change: Princess Catherine. As the British monarchy evolves, Figures like Princess Catherine exemplify the blend of tradition and modernity needed to navigate the future. In a world where institutions are questioned more than they are revered, Catherine has done something extraordinary. She has made royalty feel human again. Her presence doesn't just echo the grandeur of centuries past. It carries the quiet strength of a woman who has grown into her role, who has learned to lead not with commands, but with compassion. In her, the monarchy has found something it desperately needed: relevance that doesn't reject tradition, and tradition that doesn't fear change. She now represents far more than a royal title. Catherine stands as a symbol of family, continuity, and progress. At a time when the world feels fractured and public trust in leadership is dwindling, she has managed to unify both ends of a generational divide. The older generation sees in her the dignity and discretion of Queen Elizabeth. The younger generation sees authenticity, empathy, and a woman willing to use her voice for causes that actually matter. She doesn't lecture. She listens. And somehow, in that listening, she's been able to carry the weight of both a legacy and a future. This delicate balance is what sets her apart. Catherine isn't just walking the line between royal protocol and public expectation, she's redrawing it. Her work in early childhood development, her open advocacy for mental health, her calm during times of national grief, all of it has helped forge a new definition of what it means to serve as a modern royal. She hasn't had to abandon ceremony to embrace progress. She's simply shown that it's possible to do both, and to do it with grace. Yet for all her public appearances, accolades, and popularity, the most powerful thing Catherine brings to the monarchy is something less tangible: emotional intelligence. It's her quiet understanding of what people need from their royal family, not just a figurehead, but a moral center. Someone who can represent not just the nation's history, but its hopes. And that emotional intelligence may very well be the monarchy's most valuable asset as it faces the decades ahead. Because this new era will not be built by decree, it will be built through connection. Catherine's journey is proof that the crown isn't simply passed down. It must be earned. Through trust, through service, through moments that test a person's strength in silence, not in spotlight. She has never chased power, and yet, power has found its way to her because she understands what to do with it. Her rise hasn't been loud, but it has been profound. The people see it. The palace sees it. And perhaps most importantly, the king sees it too. Now, the world watches and waits not for a coronation, but for a transformation. Because when that day comes, when Catherine stands beside William not just in title but in spirit, the monarchy will not just survive, it will have evolved because she had the grace to embrace change and the strength to lead it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.